Non terre plus ultra! Booyah!
Apex Legends is currently one of the most popular first-person shooters on the market. It combines character-based abilities, hard-hitting shooting mechanics, and the Battle Royale formula to create something that has truly resonated with a lot of people. In spite of receiving criticism regarding the game's pricey cosmetics and subpar network infrastructure, Respawn Entertainment has managed to keep up with the hype and deliver a critically and commercially successful game for over 2 years now. It's impressive to say the least. In light of this, I want to take a philosophical look at how Battle Royales, designed as first-person shooters, are fundamentally flawed, and how various different mechanics, some specific to Apex, punish the player for engaging with them. I also want to talk about some potential solutions, as well as why these games have been so successful and why people still continue to play and enjoy them despite their issues. Now, to be clear, this video was made to address the default Battle Royale mode of Apex Legends. This critique does not necessarily apply to the new Arena mode. From what I've played, it seems like a more balanced and competitive experience than what we're used to, and that's exciting. That being said, let's get started. Apex Legends has great gunplay, interactive team play, and so many fun abilities to use. It looks nice, it has fantastic UI, and it manages to bring new ideas to the table that separate it from its competitors. I enjoy the game myself, and I've put a lot of time into it. The problem with Apex Legends, as with most Battle Royales, is that its design as a first-person shooter is frequently in opposition to its design as a Battle Royale. The game gives you a gun and tells you to go shoot the bad guys, but then constantly punishes you for doing just that. In traditional multiplayer FPS games, there are 2 teams fighting for dominance on a moderately sized map, usually for the highest kill count or control over an objective. Look at Battlefield, Call of Duty, Titanfall, Valorant, or Overwatch. Battle Royales have a twist. They put loads of people together on a huge map and divide everyone into many different teams, all competing against one another. It's every man for himself. Sounds fun, right? Sometimes it is. Winning a Battle Royale against all odds and defeating so many enemies in a row can be extremely satisfying. We'll get into why this works later on. The problem is that choosing to actually fight anyone at almost any point in a Battle Royale is ultimately not in the player's best interest. This is for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, fighting does not reward the player in a practical way in the vast majority of circumstances. At the end of the game, it doesn't matter how many enemies you killed or how many fights you survived. All that matters is being the last team alive. This means there is no real incentive to fight except for a few specific situations. In the early game, you probably don't have all the ammo, guns, or armor you might want in order to survive in the long run. There are 2 ways to obtain these things. You can look for them around the map, or you can kill enemies and strip them of their gear. For players who are not skilled in winning fights, or just prefer to explore, looking around the map is a pretty good option. We'll talk more about that later. But for players who either prefer to obtain loot faster, or just like fighting in general, killing enemies is the better choice. If you fall into this camp, it's probably smart to take a fight or 2 early on, provided you can win them. An incentive to fight that is specific to the ranked mode of Apex is the possibility of earning ranked points for a capped number of assists or kills. But no such point system exists in the primary mode, and I won't be going over it here. The only other situation in which fighting is incentivized is when there are only 2 teams left on the map and you are one of them. There is no way to win other than to eliminate the last team and secure your victory. Seems similar to traditional FPS games, doesn't it? That's because it is. Those games do it a little bit better, but we'll get to that in a second. One interesting way Apex has attempted to address the lack of an incentive to fight is by allowing damage dealt to other players to level up your shields. This is fine, but ultimately not a real solution. While it does reward players for fighting, it's all too easy to farm damage over long ranges by poking with sniper rifles solely to obtain better shields with no intention of actually closing in for the kill. Close-range battles are still a significant risk and not worth the effort to level up shields alone. With a long time to kill, it's hard to ever eliminate a team at long range. Why is fighting so risky? Because it attracts third parties. A third party is a team intruding on an in-progress fight between 2 existing teams in order to take advantage of the fact that one or both of them are likely in a state of disadvantage or nearly eliminated. It's much easier to win a fight against a team that's been softened up a bit than a team at full strength, It's an unfortunate reality in all Battle Royale games, and I think it's one of the genre's most significant issues. It never feels fun or fair to die like that.
I want your heart. I can slice it up for a snack.
Now, one way Apex Legends rewards teams for winning a fight is with shield swapping. Upon death, all players' shields are automatically returned to a fully charged state. They can no longer use them, obviously, but the player who killed them can almost instantly swap from a damaged shield to the dead player's fresh one. This reduces the amount of time they have to spend before they are prepared for another fight, but it's not enough to significantly cut down on how prevalent third parties are in the game. A team who just finished fighting will always be at a disadvantage as long as they still have to reload, revive down teammates, recharge abilities, and heal up after combat. Recharging shields is only one small part of that. Why are third parties so common and easy to execute? One reason is because fighting is loud and visible. Guns make noise that alert nearby teams of your location, while bullet tracers, grenades, and abilities create obvious visuals even from a long distance. Anyone within earshot or line of sight of your location is almost certainly going to be aware that you're fighting. Perhaps you could fix this by reducing the distance that sound travels across the map, or tweaking how bright and obvious the abilities and explosions are. Maybe the maps could be designed to be more modular instead of so open and vast. If you have ideas to reduce third parties, leave them in the comments below. I think there are plenty of ways to experiment with making third parties less of a problem. It's just a shame that the developers of Apex seem to be so uninterested in doing so. I think there's a reason for this, but we'll get to that in a minute.
First fatality. Let the game
Let's explore this way.
Another way players are punished for fighting is with the ring, a common mechanic of most battle royales. Apex is no exception. The ring is a massive circle on the map that does damage to anyone outside of it until they die, preventing them from staying there for very long. It gets smaller and smaller as the match goes on. The ring's starting location and where it ends up is entirely random. It's a simple concept, really. The developers had to figure out how to force people to fight each other on such a large map. It makes sense why the ring is in the game, so what's the problem with it? The main issue with the ring is that it discourages fighting and exploration while encouraging camping and hiding. When the ring's next location is revealed on the map to all players, it's extremely advantageous to travel there early and find a good spot to pitch your tent, make a campfire, and roast some marshmallows until the next ring is revealed. If you instead want to explore the map, you are punished with potentially damage from the ring itself or a bad position once you're forced to go to the next ring's location. Of course, this depends on how lucky the ring's position is relative to you. If you want to fight, you have to deal with your current position for a while. Fighting takes up time and usually involves maneuvering in one general area until all enemies are dealt with. The problem here is that depending on your luck and how long the fight lasts, you could end up being overtaken by the ring when it next moves and taking damage from it. This might not seem like a big deal at first, as you can usually outrun the ring pretty easily. The issue comes when you get to the next ring's area. As I mentioned before, you often run into a bad position at this point. This could be due to the terrain of the map, or more often, an enemy team sitting just inside the ring looking for teams to gatekeep. You are now in a predicament. Do you run to the safety of the ring and let the enemy shoot at you? Do you run away from the enemies and take damage from the ring so you can go around and find a better position? Do you fight the enemies right here while taking ring damage and hope you can defeat them despite the odds? There's no good option here. The fact of the matter is that you are at a severe disadvantage in this situation, and it makes for a fight that feels unfair at best and impossible at worst. One way Apex Legends has tried to alleviate the restricting nature of the ring is by introducing items called heat shields. These are small, deployable bubbles that completely block ring damage for a short time, allowing teams to stay in the ring a bit longer if they choose to do so. This is a good idea, but it doesn't do much to fix the problem of the ring forcing teams into bad positions on a regular basis. At best, heat shields allow for quick actions just outside the safe zone, such as looting or reviving a teammate. They almost never last long enough to allow a significant reposition if you do come across enemies gatekeeping you. As it stands, the ring's presence in the game, while effective at facilitating the Battle Royale formula, actively punishes players for fighting and rewards players for moving quickly and camping in good positions. While many abilities and mechanics exist in Apex to make traversing the map and obtaining those good positions easier, they are not the main appeal of the game. The most interesting thing they offer is strategy and verticality during fights. The trailers don't showcase players running long distances, or using zip lines or balloons to get to a strategic building inside the next ring. They show you how cool it is to shoot enemies with flashy guns, and style on them with finishers or combat abilities. The core of the game as a first-person shooter is gunplay and battle. Are you starting to see how this clashes with the concept of a battle royale?
Yep. Nothing I can do, dude.
Contact with target. Hostile close.
Taking fire. Reload.
I think Apex Legends has extremely fun combat. Aside from a few instances which have mostly been addressed, the guns are all balanced quite well. Abilities are impactful without completely overtaking the gunplay. The mechanics are tight, responsive, and satisfying. I have to give credit where it's due. Combat in Apex is great on its own. The problem I have is how the Battle Royale formula keeps pushing me away from it. One design decision nearly all Battle Royales share is randomized loot the player can collect around the map. This includes weapons, shields, healing items, grenades, and other useful stuff. Apex Legends also does this, unsurprisingly. The problem is that all players are so helpless upon first landing that luck plays a major factor in who wins those first few fights. Did you get to the level 3 shield 2 seconds before the enemy did? Looks like you win. Did you land next to a supply bin with a scope while your enemy landed at the supply bin directly to your left with an assault rifle inside? Looks like you lose. The only way to avoid the insanity of hot drops, as they're called, is to land far away from other teams in a remote part of the map, where you can explore and loot to your heart's content before ever coming into contact with an enemy team. The obvious issue with this is that it wastes so much time. You essentially have to choose between chaotic, unbalanced combat, or 20 minutes of running around finding the perfect arsenal before engaging in 1 or 2 fights at the very end of the match. Players who want to shoot enemies in a shooter game are punished for doing just that. As anyone who's played a Battle Royale knows, this dichotomy forces players into some bad habits. It's all too common for teammates who lose their initial fight in a hot drop to disconnect as soon as they're downed. They don't wait to see if you can revive them. They wanted to play the game and now they can't. The fastest way to get back to playing is to go back to the main menu, queue up for a new game, and drop again. It only makes sense. Why sit around waiting to see if your teammate wins at a huge disadvantage when you could be in a new game by now? If, on the other hand, your team lands far away from the action and loots up first, there will most likely be at least one player on your team who wanted to fight as soon as possible. They did not want to land here, so what do? They immediately run towards the nearest gunfire, of course. The problem is that they've left their team in the dust and put themselves at a huge disadvantage in any fight that they find. It's easy to blame players like this for running away, inevitably dying, and disconnecting. Why don't they stick with their team? The reason... Now, hear me out, this might sound crazy. The reason is because they want to shoot people in a shooting game. They don't want to follow their team around for ages looking for all the shiniest loot like a magpie. They want to fight. They would rather engage at a disadvantage than run around the map forever doing nothing. Another less significant issue is that teammates landing in a building together are at a disadvantage due to the loot being spread so thin across their team. They're better off landing in separate buildings so they can each obtain a more complete loadout before fighting. Makes sense. The problem with this is when you find yourself in a hot drop, you're confronted by some enemies, and you notice that your teammates are nowhere near you. By the time they realize you need help, it'll already be too late. Apex would do well to encourage teams to stay together, rather than break apart immediately after landing. As it is, the game just isn't designed that way, and it leads to more disconnects, more failed hot drops, and less loot to go around when you do stick together. In spite of its design as a game based on teamwork, Apex punishes you for playing with your own team at the start of each and every match. One way the developers have experimented with fixing some of this was in the game's anniversary event, where every player dropped with a basic loadout, including a pistol and a shield. This meant that all players could immediately start fighting after landing, and the power imbalance due to lucky loot was reduced a bit. This event also removed a lot of the low-level items in the game, making the process of building a sufficient loadout much faster. Players of all skill levels loved this event and wanted these changes to be incorporated into the game permanently. Now, this didn't happen for a while, but with this new season it seems they've gone through with most of these changes, aside from giving you a pistol. This is definitely a step in the right direction to make hot drops feel less like a crapshoot and more like an intense battle with high stakes. I hope the developers continue to make even more changes like this. It's great. At this point, I'm sure you can see how randomized loot often punishes players for wanting to fight quickly. I'm fully aware that some players might enjoy the chaotic battles that happen in hot drops. That's fine. Still others might enjoy running around and looting for most of the match. That's also fine. We'll talk more about that soon enough. I'm simply arguing that the game's random loot system encourages players to rely on either luck or passivity in order to survive the beginning of a match. First-person shooters should consistently reward you for pursuing the core gameplay loop of combat. Apex Legends rewards you inconsistently at best and actively punishes you at its worst.
Send in a decoy. Wait, how do I know I'm not?
Give me a sec.
The respawn system is another aspect of the game that punishes you for fighting. If a teammate is only down during combat, reviving them is relatively quick and easy, but if a teammate dies, it's much harder to bring them back. First, you have to go to their death box and retrieve their banner before a timer runs out. This means avoiding enemies who might have been looting your teammate, and enduring the long animation when you actually get the banner. Now you have to escape and find a respawn beacon. These are scattered around the map, but are one-time use, and not always in a great location depending on the ring. You can also use a portable respawn beacon you might have found, but this means calling it in from the sky, revealing your position. Now you have to stand motionless on the beacon for a minute to activate it. Once that's done, a dropship flies in above you, alerting nearly the entire map that you're waiting here at a significant disadvantage. Your teammate jumps out with no items equipped, and the ship blasts off again.
Let me at him.
At this point, your teammate has to loot up extremely fast, and the enemy teams have to be pretty far away from you to avoid getting ganged up on and eliminated immediately. This is made even worse if multiple teams engage on you at once. Some people might say the respawn system is clever and exciting because it forces the player to make a risk-reward decision. You get your teammate back at the risk of attracting enemies. I understand the logic in this, but the method of getting a player back in the action should never be as risky as Apex has made it here.
Enemy spotted. It looks small.
Toss it a frag.
I downed an enemy.
Sorry, dude. I know that's kind of cruel. I'm sorry. The entire point of risk versus reward is that you have to make a calculated choice. One example might be supply drops. Players can risk being seen or ambushed for the chance of being rewarded with a better weapon. But this implies you might choose not to go for a supply drop if you consider the risk too great relative to the reward. A player should never be put in a situation where respawning their teammate is so risky that they decide against it. This is horrible for player engagement. It becomes faster to disconnect and start a new game than to wait around for your team to jump through all the hurdles to respawn you. It becomes easier for teams to avoid combat altogether rather than risk losing teammates in a fight. This ends up fracturing teams and punishing shooting in a shooting game.
Making contact with enemy.
Reloading.
Yeah, they're both gonna go down.
I'm down. Need a medic. Moving here.
At the very least, a respawn system should encourage you to get your teammate back no matter the circumstances. Death should still be a significant punishment, but perhaps undoing it should cost resources rather than risk the elimination of your entire team. Call of Duty Warzone does this with buy stations. You pay a hefty price tag with money you've collected to get your teammate back pretty quickly. There's no retrieving banners and no loud dropships. The respawn player drops out of the sky without gear and can go right back to playing the game. In addition to this, Warzone has the Gulag, a fantastic way of keeping players from leaving as soon as they die. On their first death, all players are sent to the Gulag to engage in a 1v1 with another dead player. Whoever wins is instantly respawned without their team having to do anything. This allows their team to focus on winning or escaping their current fight, and it keeps the dead player engaged with a challenge rather than sending them directly to the spectator mode. If they fail their 1v1, already use the Gulag, or the game is nearly over, they will have to wait for their team to respawn them from a buy station. If you ask me, the process of going out of your way to find a buy station, collect enough resources, and spend those resources all while being a man down is more than enough of a punishment for death. Remember, the respawn player comes back without any gear. It isn't as though respawning gives you an upper hand. At best, you end up with the same number of players as everyone else. As it stands, you're risking almost certain death for a chance at being on a level playing field in Apex Legends. That doesn't seem like an attractive choice to me. It's no wonder people disconnect so often.
You gonna res me or what, dude?
If I res you, they're gonna come finish me.
Okay.
Got the banner.
Good
Should
game,
head to the
dude.
beacon. Bam! Bam! Guess I'm running out of ideas.
One last mechanic of Apex that punishes players for fighting is the ultimate system. Many modern games use some form of a powerful ability on a long timer as a character's ultimate move. It's a fun way to give more significant power to the player on a limited basis. Overwatch is the most notable example of this. The key difference between Overwatch and Apex Legends is the way in which the ultimate ability is recharged. In Overwatch, damage and kills recharge your ultimate faster. In Apex Legends, ultimates are set on a strict timer. The only way a player can charge them faster than normal are with recharge stations randomly placed on certain maps, or the ultimate accelerant item found as random loot. The problem with this system is that a team recently finished with a fight will most likely have used their ultimates and be unable to use them in a fight with a third party. Ultimate accelerants take a while to apply and are nowhere near the first thing a player should be using when recovering from a fight. These design decisions further encourage third parties and punish players for fighting. Now, I don't think this is a huge issue compared to the other mechanics I've mentioned, especially because ultimates in Apex Legends are refreshingly weak compared to Overwatch. They can be game-changing, but they aren't just a win button. In addition, some of them recharge so fast nowadays that they may very well be ready by the time a third party engages. I would definitely address other problems before overhauling the way ultimates work in Apex, but an easy fix for now would be to allow damage or kills to recharge a player's next ultimate at least a little bit faster than if they just stood around looking at the scenery. This might help address the problem of being low on resources immediately after finishing a successful fight.
Watch out behind you, behind you, behind you. Nice.
I'm right next to you. I'm coming.
Now that we've reviewed some reasons why fighting is not in the player's best interest in Apex Legends, let's talk about why this is a problem. As I may have subtly alluded to earlier in this video, the reason a vast majority of people play first-person shooter games is to shoot bad guys. This is the appeal and core design of these games. In Battle Royales, however, so many aspects of the game instead discourage shooting. If you intend on winning, it's ultimately better to find a nice spot to camp away from the enemies for the majority of the match. But this is not the case for traditional FPS titles like Overwatch or Valorant. In Overwatch, for example, two teams start on opposite sides of the map. One of them is the attacking team, tasked with capturing a point. The other is the defending team, tasked with preventing the attackers from accomplishing this goal for a set amount of time. Even though Overwatch is heavily objective-focused, it rarely has a dull moment, and players are not discouraged from fighting for significant lengths of time. This is because the goal and method of victory is always directly impeded by enemies. The only way to win is to fight them. Sitting in a corner of the map does not benefit you in any way. A passive player is punished in traditional FPS games. A passive player is rewarded in Apex Legends. It's that simple. Another reason Battle Royale games are fundamentally flawed is due to the way they handle balance. Traditional FPS games thrive on good balance. Overwatch is at its best when two evenly matched teams duke it out. It's not fun at all when one team is significantly better than the other. Those matches end quickly and decidedly without much tension. Balance is what makes these games competitive, engaging, and fun. Even if you lose, you know that you at least had a good shot at the win and the enemies played fair and square. Conversely, Apex Legends is boring when everything is balanced. Competitive matches often see a bunch of teams poking at each other from optimal positions without ever committing to a fight. Nobody wants to be the first to initiate, because they know how harshly they will be punished for it. Instead, they camp it out until someone else makes a mistake that they can capitalize on. While it can be satisfying to make tactical plays like this, it's also pretty boring to wait around on a mountain for ages. Apex is more fun and interesting when you can get into the thick of it and win fights. This is only feasible when you have a lot of mismatched players given random loot, causing massive power disparities among them. This way, everyone has a chance of getting some kills, even if it is random and chaotic. The game sacrifices consistency and balance in order to give players the chance to shoot some baddies. Traditional FPS games don't have to do this.
Marking our surroundings.
Opening fire.
As I've made clear, these issues are not exclusive to Apex Legends. They plague nearly all Battle Royale games, and leave a bad taste in my mouth for the entire genre. It naturally follows that we should ask why Battle Royales are so successful right now, and why people continue to play them, including me. What keeps us coming back to these shooter games that discourage us from shooting most of the time? There are several factors at play here. If you play Apex Legends, you're probably familiar with the term loot goblin. This is used to refer to a player obsessed with the rarest loot above all else. They probably play a character with movement abilities to snatch all the good stuff first. They're typically seen looting enemy bodies before reviving their teammates. They would rather search for the perfect golden weapon than fight bad guys. Why do players act like this when good positioning, gunplay, and teamwork are so much more important to securing a win? The reason is simple. Loot in Battle Royale games is extremely satisfying to obtain by its very design. In a sense, Apex Legends has turned looting into a game of its own. Why do you think there's so much of it in various different neon colors scattered across the map? They could have just given you a loadout right away, like other games do. Their goal was to grab the attention of passive players and give them something interesting to do that doesn't involve dying right away. They did this by making something as mundane as picking up a necessary item in a video game into an exciting reward for the player's efforts in finding it. The colors are partially there to make it easy to distinguish a level 1 item from a level 3, but they're also in service of the endless hunt for rarer and better treasure. It's enough to make a loot goblin out of any of us. Not all Battle Royale games have the shiniest loot or the most overpowered items to pick up, but they all attempt to give the player a sense of progression as the match goes on by allowing them to become more powerful over time, as they either loot more buildings or kill more enemies. This is satisfying regardless of whether or not it leads to a win. This means it's effective at keeping the interest of less skilled players who rarely ever walk away victorious. At least they had fun leveling up their shields, equipping the rarest attachments, or finding that rare sniper rifle in a supply drop. It's the same feeling you get when you find diamonds in Minecraft or charms in Hollow Knight. You might not be winning fights or outsmarting enemies, but you get to feel special because you found a cool toy, and there's a chance that this toy might even help you do something useful later on. The difference is that upgrades in Minecraft and Hollow Knight stick around for a while. In Apex, you lose your progress at the end of each game. The detriment of this system is that the game's focus is shifted away from combat and positioning when loot is essential to coming out on top. In a game about fighting everyone to the death, this doesn't make much sense from a design perspective. As I mentioned before, hot drops are almost entirely decided by who gets the luckiest loot upon landing. Nobody wants to lose just because they got unlucky. The harder the good loot is to find, and the more it makes a difference in a fight, the worse the experience is for a player who just wants to shoot baddies. Random loot ultimately discourages fighting in exchange for giving players a shot at cheap kills if they happen to get lucky. But what if you enjoy the chaos of random loot and unfair fights?
I've spotted an enemy.
There's an undeniable appeal to randomness in the right context. Just look at Mario Kart. Random items come from mystery boxes and sometimes reward the player with powerful abilities. You might win or lose in large part due to them, though your skill in driving around the course still plays a role. This is one reason Mario Kart is so universally appealing and fun. Anyone can play around and at least have a chance of doing well. In a game like CSGO, it's much harder to win without practice and experience. If you miss your shots or get caught out of position, you just lose. It's not a very forgiving experience, which means it makes for a perfect competitive game. Highly skilled players really have a chance to shine. There's a reason CSGO had a huge esports scene and Mario Kart did not. Is one of these games better than the other? Not necessarily, they serve different purposes. Mario Kart is a casual party game for pretty much anyone. CSGO is a tight shooter with the strategy and mechanics to appeal to hardcore FPS players. I think the main reason Battle Royale games are so popular right now is in large part due to how random the games are and how much that appeals to a wider audience of more casual players. A person without much skill could play a round of Apex Legends and at least get some kills or maybe even win thanks to good luck. They can immediately jump in and start seeing progress without any practice or strategy. That's a lot less punishing to your average Joe than Counter-Strike. The contrast to this is when a casual player finds that luck is not in their favor. Perhaps they land in the thick of the action multiple games in a row only to die immediately due to bad luck. This doesn't feel fun at all. I know because it's happened to me a lot. My statement from earlier still stands. Nobody wants to lose just because they got unlucky. The caveat to this is when you can safely blame the random circumstances that led you to lose. I only lost because I got unlucky. It's not that big of a deal. Perhaps losing due to bad luck isn't so bad after all. It's certainly easier to accept than the idea that you lost because you lack the skill to compete. Couple this with the fact that jumping into a new game is so quick and easy, and you have the reason why Battle Royales haven't completely died out as a genre yet. For most people, the highs are worth the lows. The unlucky deaths are worth the moments of triumph and victory, no matter how random or rare those moments are. It's oddly similar to the reason why people like gambling so much. Even if you know you'll most likely lose, the slim chance at a win without any skill involved is irresistible. Let's talk about that for a second. In most games, your chances of winning a match are designed to be about 50%. There are two teams competing for a goal. Only one can win. Theoretically, your chances of winning in a battle royale are far lower due to the sheer number of teams fighting for dominance. Most people playing a game want to win at some point, otherwise why keep playing? We've already looked into some of those reasons, but another big one is the allure of the impossible. The harder victory is to achieve, the more rewarding it is to finally grasp.
That's what makes it all worth it, man. All the hot drops, all the resets, for that.
The funny thing about this is that it's inversely proportional to the skill of the player and keeps them playing for their own reasons no matter which end of the spectrum they're on. Let me explain. A casual player with almost no skill has a tiny chance at winning. If he loses, it's not that big of a deal. After all, he mostly plays so he can find loot and get lucky kills on unsuspecting enemies. Winning is just a bonus. When it does happen, though, it's incredibly gratifying. A relatively skilled player who enjoys combat has a higher chance of winning. He can afford to take more fights and enjoy the gunplay because he can sometimes overcome the odds against him. Because of this, he will win more often. Even when he loses, he will continue to play the game simply because he enjoys the combat. The unfortunate thing for him is that the game is constantly punishing him for taking fights. If you haven't figured it out yet, this is me. On the extreme end of the spectrum is the player who values winning above all else. He doesn't care as much about gambling on hot drops or engaging in intense battles. He just wants to win. Fortunately for him, there are plenty of players out there willing to fight each other and thin out the competition. When it comes down to the last ring, this player's superior positioning and stash of grenades will grant him victory fairly often. He keeps playing because winning is fun, even if it consists of running around a map for 20 minutes straight. This is why I believe battle royales are so incredibly popular and why they continue to stick around in spite of how their mechanics punish people for playing them like they would any other FPS title. The reality is that fun is different for everyone, and the high level of randomness in battle royales appeals to the casual gamers who make up the majority of the market. For these people, the lottery of hot drops, the chaos of third parties, and the endless search for loot are fun despite not leading to a victory because they offer a chance to feel successful without any real investment or skill. The satisfying combat mechanics and abilities appeal to the more competitive players like myself. Despite how the game punishes us for it, the guns feel great to use, and the team play is fun because it's so polished. Finally, the opportunity to see the words, "You are the champion" on the screen appeals to another demographic of players. Despite how boring it can be to sit around waiting for the match to end, the ability to win with nothing but high ground and abilities is fun for some people. There's something here for everyone. A battle royale is, in a sense, a jack of all trades but a master of none. I don't think battle royales are going away anytime soon, but I do think it's unfortunate that the battle royale formula has become the go-to method for making a game accessible and popular with the masses. There are so many ways to make games competitive and balanced while also appealing to a wide audience. Let's go over just a few of these methods.
He's reviving it upside the house.
Skill in gaming is not exclusive to how good you are at aiming with a mouse. This should be obvious, but there are many different kinds of skills that are useful in various ways. In Apex, for example, aiming well and being able to hit your target is great, but it's also important to understand how to position yourself relative to other teams so you don't end up getting pinched or caught off guard. Being able to work with your team and plan out your abilities can straight up win you fights for free. Mastering the movement of the game will help as well. There are countless examples of how different kinds of skills can be valuable depending on the situation. It's unfortunate that Apex sidesteps the focus on this in favor of the more random elements, so key to battle royales. Games like Overwatch have taken this concept and tailored specific characters around specific skills. If you suck at aiming but you're good at combos and timing your attacks, Doomfist is a good character to try. If you prefer to focus on resource management and supporting your team, Moira might be fun. If you're good at distracting the enemy and dividing their attention, Winston is perfect. There are so many ways to make a difference without having to aim well. This opens the game up to a much wider audience than it would have otherwise, and keeps the experience competitive.
Firing. Rings nearby, 1 minute till close. I'm spotted.
But what if a player isn't particularly good at any of these things? What if they're just bad at the game? What could possibly keep them playing it? The answer is progression. No matter the game, progression is essential to keeping players invested over the long term. Shooting sci-fi weapons or punching people as a massive gorilla is fun, but it gets old. The key is to supplement these immediately engaging elements with permanent rewards, achievements, or cosmetics to give the player something more to strive for. One of my favorite examples of progression is Respawn's Titanfall 2, which takes cues from a lot of older FPS titles. Instead of releasing loads of overpriced skins, Apex and Valorant, or overpowered guns inside random loot boxes, Call of Duty, Titanfall rewards players the old-fashioned way with XP. Experience is earned by playing matches. Over time, you'll get new skins, new factions to play as, or new abilities to use. Once you've unlocked everything, you have the option to reset your level back to the beginning and do it all over again. You keep all your previously unlocked skins, but must earn back abilities and weapons. Now, what's the incentive to do this, you might ask? Even more skins. Want your character to be pink? Want your gun to be gold? Well, now you can. Some cosmetics are rewarded at random, but the more prestigious ones require you to grind your way to them by using the weapon you want to upgrade. The genius of a system like this is that the player really doesn't need a lot of skill to engage with it. They don't need to be at the top of the leaderboard every match. They don't even need to win. All they need to do is play the game. For those who do enjoy a bit of a challenge, Titanfall 2 also contains plenty of cosmetics locked behind achievements. This XP-based method of rewarding players has fallen out of style nowadays thanks to free-to-play and loot box-focused game design, but I truly believe it still has potential, even if it probably doesn't make the kind of money that those other systems do.
Recharging shields.
We've got company.
This leads me to my final point: money. All online multiplayer games need some way to keep the servers running and the developers fed. Games take a lot of money to create nowadays, and studios want to see a return on that investment. It only makes sense that games are seeing a massive shift towards monetization as the industry continues to grow. Gone are the days of unlocking skins by grinding for them. Now you have to buy them outright, or buy loot boxes and hope you get something good. No longer do you pay for a game once when buying it. Now you get free games, but you have to pay for the battle pass every season if you want anything to unlock. More money means more support. More support means the game will last longer and attract a larger player base. A larger player base means your friends are more likely to play it with you. The more people playing, the more people dump money into it via loot boxes, expensive cosmetics, or battle passes. It's a vicious cycle driven by cash flow, and it's not stopping anytime soon. Why create multiple games over the course of 5 years when you could make one big game and keep it afloat that whole time? It's worth the flack if it means studios only have to maintain games rather than make new and exciting ones with risky business propositions dependent on the game's actual quality. It's sad, but the recent trends toward making games more popular and accessible than ever before makes complete sense from a business perspective.
They're hiding. Yep. Get him.
Underneath.
In conclusion, a first-person shooter as a battle royale is a poor design decision at its core that only works because there are so many people who play it in so many different ways that aren't in line with how the game punishes and rewards the player. Apex Legends is particularly guilty of this, using a myriad of mechanics that discourage fighting despite the main appeal being the combat. The result is a game that offers something for everyone, while ultimately refusing to deliver a fully fleshed out experience. The reason for this design is to market to the widest player base possible, to rake in cash, and drive the cycle of monetization as far as it will go. I would love to see more coherent, balanced, and satisfying experiences in the online multiplayer scene, but I think the industry as a whole is pulling against that right now. Not all hope is lost, however. There will always be new games to rise up and take the place of old ones. There will always be new studios and publishers trying innovative ideas. There will always be artists who want to bring their unique visions to life in this medium. I can't wait to see what's next, and I hope Apex Legends continues to improve. Thanks for watching. If you liked this longer, more in-depth kind of format, let us know by leaving a like. And if you're interested in seeing more, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to be notified when we release new videos. Adios!